I'd always been the kind of person who thrived on movement, on stepping into places where no one knew me and nothing felt familiar. Since college, that itch to travel alone had never left me. New cities, strange streets, diners where I was just another face. It all gave me a sense of freedom most people found unnerving. My friends used to tease me about it, saying I was like some kind of ghost drifting through airports, arriving suddenly, vanishing without a sound, leaving no footprint. They were half right. Most of them couldn't keep up, not financially, not emotionally. They had partners, steady jobs that demanded their presence, or simply no appetite for solitude. But me? I worked remote in digital marketing. My relationships were either short-lived or non-existent. Whatever money I managed to save, I funneled into trips. By 27, I'd crossed nearly every major city in California off my list, except Riverside City. It wasn't glamorous like San Francisco or Los Angeles, but it had its charm. People talked about its old architecture, its underappreciated nightlife, the riverfront. To me, it was the last unchecked box. That alone was reason enough to go. When my plane landed, I felt that familiar jolt in my chest, that mix of excitement and nerves. The airport was smaller than I'd imagined. Quiet, almost sleepy. 30 minutes later, I was in a cab, weaving through streets lined with neon diner signs and low brick buildings. My hotel, the Grandview Inn, wasn't much to brag about online, but it looked clean, centrally located, and had decent reviews. That was all I needed. The lobby surprised me. It was warmer, more polished than I expected. Golden light spilled across polished marble floors. A fountain whispered softly from the far wall, and the receptionist greeted me with a practiced but genuine smile. "Checking in?" she asked. "Yes," I said, setting my bag down. "Walker, Ethan Walker." She typed quickly, nodded, and slid a keycard across the counter. "Room 214, second floor. Elevators around the corner." I thanked her, took the card, and reached for my luggage. That's when I noticed him. He leaned against a pillar like he had nowhere urgent to be, mid-30s maybe. A baseball cap pulled low so his eyes were shaded. Still, when our gazes met, he smiled. Easy, casual. "First time here?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, shifting the strap of my backpack higher. "Second for me," he replied, his voice calm, conversational. "Came through last year for work." He didn't break eye contact, but it wasn't intense, just open. "Where are you from?" "Bay Area," I said. "Here for a few days." "Nice. I'm Mark." He glanced at my rolling suitcase. "You need a hand with that?" "I'm heading upstairs anyway." Normally I would have said no. Too many travel blogs warning against trusting strangers. But something about his tone felt harmless, like he'd be just as fine if I said no. "Sure," I said. "Thanks. I appreciate it." We walked toward the elevator, his hand hooking easily around the handle of my smaller bag. He talked as if we'd met before, mentioning food along the river, the courthouse worth seeing downtown, the way locals were friendlier than outsiders assumed. His words filled the silence in a way that was neither forced nor awkward. When we reached the second floor, I unlocked my door and he set my bag just outside, giving a small wave as he stepped back. "Well, Ethan, enjoy your stay." "Thanks again, Mark." He walked down the hall, his cap low, shoulders loose, like someone who had all the time in the world. I didn't dwell on it. Just another traveler, maybe a little more outgoing than most. Inside, the room smelled faintly of bleach and carpet shampoo. I tossed my things aside, pulled the curtains half shut, and collapsed on the bed. Travel had a way of draining me, and all I wanted in that moment was to let sleep pull me under. By the time I dragged myself out of bed, the sunlight was already thinning into late afternoon. My stomach growled, and I figured a walk before dinner would help shake off the travel fatigue. I headed downstairs, the lobby lit in the same warm glow as before. As I passed the front desk, the receptionist from earlier lifted her hand slightly. "Excuse me, Mr. Walker," she said, her tone lower than before, almost hesitant. I stopped, surprised. "Yeah?" Her eyes darted toward the lobby entrance, then back at me. "That man who helped you with your bags earlier, do you know him?" "Mark?" I asked, shrugging. "Not really. Met him when I checked in." Something in her face tightened. She lowered her voice further. "I don't believe he's a guest here. I checked the system earlier and didn't see his name on any of our lists." My mouth went dry. "You're sure he's not staying here?" "I can't say for certain," she admitted, her lips pressing into a thin line. "But I'm fairly confident. He'd been standing outside near the entrance for quite some time before you arrived. At first I thought he was waiting for someone, but..." She hesitated, clearly weighing how much to say. "If you see him again, please keep your distance." A ripple of unease ran through me, though I forced a smile. "Thanks for telling me." I walked out into the city, trying to shake her warning. The evening air was cool, the river glinting with reflected light. I wandered along the trail, browsed a couple of shops, ate a greasy burger at a small diner. The buzz of people and traffic dulled my nerves, made me feel foolish for letting paranoia creep in. By the time I returned, a different staff member stood at the desk, and the earlier conversation seemed like a fading dream. Upstairs, I showered, changed clothes, and stretched out, telling myself I'd rest before grabbing dinner. That's when I heard it. A knock. "Housekeeping," a quiet male voice called from the hallway. I frowned, glancing at the clock. 6 p.m. Housekeeping didn't come this late, and I hadn't requested anything. A slow chill spread across my skin. I crept toward the peephole. The hallway was empty. "Hello?" I called through the door, my voice unsteady. Silence. I backed away, pulse quickening. One thought burned its way into my mind. Mark. Snatching my phone, I called the front desk. "Did you send housekeeping to my room?" "No, sir," the woman answered. I could hear the confusion in her voice. "Housekeeping is done for the day." "There was someone at my door," I said quickly. "A man said he was housekeeping." Her tone sharpened immediately. "Stay inside. I'll send someone up right now." 5 minutes later, a real maid knocked softly. I cracked the door, and she smiled nervously. "Everything okay, sir?" I explained what had happened. Her face drained of color. "I'll tell management," she said, her voice clipped with urgency. Still shaken, I decided to leave soon after, eating dinner out and booking a spot on a city lights tour. The streets were alive with music and chatter, a distraction that almost worked. Almost. When I returned around 10, another new face was behind the desk. I explained everything again. She listened intently, then checked the hallway surveillance. Her brow furrowed. "Nobody's been near your room in the last hour," she said. Relief flickered through me, but uneasily. I nodded, thanked her, and went upstairs. I double-checked the lock, shoved a chair against the handle, and turned the TV on low, hoping the noise would calm me. Eventually, exhaustion won. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I felt the mattress shift. At first, my dreaming brain mistook it for part of the show playing on TV. But when I rolled my head to the side, my blood iced over. A man in a black mask and cap was crawling onto my bed. His hand shot out, clamping over my mouth before my scream could leave my throat. Panic exploded in my chest. I bucked, thrashed, my muffled cries barely piercing the air. "Shh," he hissed. I bit down hard. Cloth filled my mouth with the taste of dust and sweat. I screamed again, louder this time, raw with terror. A knock rattled the door almost instantly. "Sir? Is everything okay?" The man cursed under his breath, shoved me down hard, and sprang off the bed. He yanked the door open so fast it slammed against the wall, knocking into the staff member outside. She yelped, stumbling back as he tore down the hallway. Doors opened. Guests peered out. Staff rushed upstairs. I trembled so violently I could barely speak, my voice broken as I tried to explain. The police arrived quickly. The staff pieced together the only thing that made sense. The intruder had somehow gotten hold of a master key, That fact alone chilled me deeper than anything. The idea that no lock could protect me. Surveillance caught him fleeing down the stairwell, but his face was blurred by the mask and cap. Deep down, I didn't need footage. I knew it was Mark. He hadn't carried my bag to be friendly. He'd carried it to learn where I slept. The hotel refunded my stay, moved me to another floor, handed every recording over to the police. But weeks passed, then months. No phone call, no updates, no arrest. Sometimes I wonder if he tried again, if he found someone less lucky. And even now, whenever I check into a hotel, I can hear it echo faintly in my memory. That soft knock, that low voice. Housekeeping. And my blood turns to ice. I never used to be afraid of flying. In fact, when I was younger, airports felt like magic to me. I'd get this strange thrill just stepping into a terminal. The faint smell of burnt coffee mixed with disinfectant, the buzz of rolling suitcases, the way people clutch their passports like lifelines. There was something electric in the air whenever boarding was announced, a collective nervousness that felt like anticipation. To me, it wasn't just about traveling somewhere new. It was the idea that maybe, just maybe, the next flight would carry me toward a version of myself I hadn't yet discovered. But that was before the winter of 2014. At the time, I was 19, a sophomore at a university in Boston. That Christmas was supposed to be my first away from home, away from my family in Sofia, Bulgaria. I told myself I could handle it. Staying behind meant independence, more study time, and the relief of not draining money we didn't really have on a plane ticket. My parents said they understood, though I could hear the strain in my mother's voice each time she asked, "Are you sure you don't want to come home, Mila?" The question was gentle, but beneath it sat her disappointment, her longing. By December 20th, the loneliness had already started chewing its way into me. The dorms were hollow, echoing with the absence of students. The dining hall barely kept hours. And Boston winters? They don't just sting, they punish. Snow piled up higher than my shoulders, the sidewalks froze into glass, and the wind sliced straight through my bones no matter how many layers I wore. One night I curled under 3 mismatched blankets, the radiator hissing weakly beside me. My laptop glowed pale blue on the desk, tabs of discount flight websites open like tiny portals to escape. I wasn't planning on it, at least not at first. But the thought came suddenly, almost violently. Go home. Surprise them. It was irrational. 3 days before Christmas Eve, flights were astronomical, connections risky. But I pictured it anyway. My father's grin splitting wide when I stepped through the front door. My little brother Daniel dropping his controller mid-game and yelling my name. The smell of my mother's cooking drifting through the apartment. The warmth of it all was enough to shove reason out of the way. The next morning, after hours of frantic searching, I found a last-minute ticket with a layover in Warsaw. Boston to Warsaw, then Warsaw to Sofia. Simple on paper. The cost gutted my savings, but I didn't care. I packed in a rush, cramming sweaters and jeans into my duffel, my heart racing with the reckless excitement of it. Only Jenna, my roommate and closest friend, knew. When I told her, she raised her eyebrows, brushing her curls out of her face. "You're insane," she said flatly. "Those last-minute flights are always a nightmare." She wasn't wrong. Logan International was bedlam that day. Children crying in clusters. Businessmen pacing with Bluetooth headsets glued to their ears. Security lines that crawled at a pace designed to test patience. I gripped my passport so tightly my knuckles ached, terrified I might drop it or misplace it. By the time I reached my gate, sweat clung to the back of my neck, my legs throbbed, and I would have collapsed into any chair if it had been offered. The flight to Warsaw was nearly 9 hours. My seat was the middle in a row of 3, the worst place for someone already restless. To my right, a woman in her 50s bundled in a fur-lined coat smiled faintly before slipping on an eye mask, retreating into sleep. To my left sat a man, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Blonde, cropped hair, a narrow face that seemed carved from stone. He wore a plain gray hoodie, his hands never still, tapping his knee, tugging at his sleeves, cracking each knuckle in rhythm. I gave him a polite nod, slipped on my headphones, and opened my notebook. At first, he seemed unremarkable. Restless, yes, but not threatening, until I started to feel it. The weight of his stare. It wasn't casual, the kind of bored glances strangers exchange on long flights. Every time I lifted my eyes, he was already looking at me. Direct, unflinching, studying, as if memorizing me piece by piece. My skin prickled. I shifted in my seat, forcing myself to act like I hadn't noticed. I scribbled words onto postcards I planned to give my family once I arrived, anything to keep my hands from trembling. Then, without warning, his voice cut through the low hum of the cabin. "You look young to be traveling alone." His English was crisp, deliberate, his accent hard to pin down. German, maybe Polish. I forced a smile, the kind you give when you don't want to encourage but don't want to provoke either. "I'm fine," I said softly, hoping that would end it. He leaned a little closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "No one waits for you in Warsaw, right?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. My pulse spiked. I forced my face to stay neutral and lied quickly. "Actually, my family's meeting me in Sofia. Lots of people waiting." He chuckled, low and quiet, as if my lie amused him. "Smart girl. Always say someone is waiting. Makes people think twice." I gave an awkward laugh, pretending I found it funny, but under the tray table, my hands were trembling so badly, I had to grip my knees just to keep them still. For the next few hours, he kept trying to talk to me. "What do you study? Do you trust doctors? Do you ever wonder what makes people evil?" The questions came from nowhere, jagged and unsettling. I answered in short, clipped sentences, never offering more than I had to. My whole body screamed at me to shrink smaller, to vanish into the seat. At one point, I put on an episode of Breaking Bad, just to drown him out, praying he'd stop. Instead, he leaned in and muttered, almost conversationally, "People love watching killers on TV. Makes them feel safe. They think killers only exist in shows." I froze, pulling one headphone off. "Excuse me." He smiled faintly, his eyes glinting under the dim cabin light. "But real killers, they sit on planes. They sit right next to you." My throat turned to sandpaper. I shoved the headphones back on, turned the volume up as high as it would go, and stared at the seatback screen, my heart thudding so loudly it drowned out the dialogue. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke, the cabin lights were low. Flight attendants were pushing carts of drinks down the narrow aisle. I stretched, reaching for my notebook, and that's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper tucked beneath it. My first thought was that it had slipped from the woman on my right, but when I unfolded it, bile rose in my throat. "I wonder what you look like without your skin." The words blurred in front of me. I dropped the note instantly, shoving it deep into the seat pocket as though burying it could erase it. My body buzzed with adrenaline so sharp it made my teeth ache. I wanted to scream, but the plane was dark, hushed, filled with the gentle snores of strangers. What could I do? Tell a flight attendant? And if he denied it, what then? For the rest of the flight, I sat frozen, my back stiff against the seat, eyes fixed on a movie I couldn't process. Every second felt stretched and suffocating. When the plane finally landed in Warsaw, I didn't wait for the line of passengers to shuffle forward. I grabbed my duffel and shoved past. My only thought, get away. My shoulder ached from the weight of the bag, but I didn't care. I didn't even look back to see if he watched me leave. At the transfer gate, I scanned the crowd, my chest tight, terrified I'd see him again. For an hour, I hid in a corner cafe, forcing down bitter coffee, pretending to read the same paragraph over and over. But he never appeared. By the time I boarded my connection to Sofia, I convinced myself it was over. Maybe he was just some unhinged stranger who would vanish from my memory with time. And at first it seemed true. My family's reaction was everything I had dreamed of. My mother cried, her arms wrapping around me so tightly I thought she might never let go. My father laughed and hugged me until my ribs hurt. Daniel practically dragged me to the living room to show me his new video games. For a little while, the warmth of home dulled the memory of that flight, made it seem like a nightmare I'd left behind. But then came January. Back in Boston unpacking my duffel, I found another slip of paper buried in the side pocket. Crumpled. Same handwriting. "I'll see you again. Don't pretend you're not curious." I dropped it as though it burned me, my hand shaking so violently I had to sit down. 2 months later, in February, my mother called from Sofia. Her voice wavered, trembling like it had when she asked me not to spend Christmas alone. "Mila, did you see the news?" She sent me a link to a Bulgarian article. I translated it quickly, dread rising with every word. A man arrested in Warsaw, charged with multiple counts of rape, attempted kidnapping, and 2 murders. The photo made my stomach twist. Blonde cropped hair, narrow face, eyes I knew too well. It was him. The man who had sat next to me for 9 hours, asking if anyone was waiting for me in Warsaw. Even now, years later, I avoid long flights when I can. I never take middle seats. And sometimes, lying awake at night, I hear his words again. Real killers sit right next to you. And I wonder how many times we've all been just inches away from something we'll never fully understand. I never imagined a vacation could completely reshape the way I thought about traveling. Up until then, I'd always believed that leaving your comfort zone, chasing experiences and seeing the world was the purest kind of freedom. I worked hard, saved carefully, and made a promise to myself. Once a year, I'd push pause on the routine, work, bills, obligations, and go somewhere new. Back in the winter of 2018, when Chicago's cold felt crueler than usual, I told my girlfriend Emily we needed to escape for a week. She was burned out from long hospital shifts, nights blending into mornings without sleep, and I was drowning in year-end chaos at the accounting firm. We were still in our 20s, young but already exhausted, desperate for a reminder that life could feel like more than an endless loop of work and recovery. Emily hesitated. She always did. She had this cautious streak, always running through worst-case scenarios before agreeing to anything. But I wore her down with an easy pitch. Warm sun, turquoise ocean, food whenever we wanted it, margaritas whenever we wanted them more. Just 7 days of us. No alarms, no deadlines, no phones buzzing every second. We booked a smaller resort on the Yucatan Peninsula, not one of the loud, glossy towers in Cancun, but an all-inclusive with glowing reviews and a price that felt suspiciously low. The photos looked unreal. Hammocks strung between palm trees, white sand that looked like spilled sugar, water so blue it almost looked fake. I remember laughing as I clicked confirm. "Emily, this place is such a bargain that if it's real, we might never come home." She kissed me, and for the first time in months I felt a weight lift. When we landed in Mexico, the heat hit us immediately. Thick and sweet, like walking into a greenhouse. My hoodie and jeans clung awkwardly, and Emily muttered while tying her hair back, "God, I've missed this weather." The shuttle ride to the resort was rough, weaving along cracked asphalt through walls of green jungle. Our driver barely spoke English, but kept pointing out fruit stands and tiny villages. His smile was friendly, but his eyes were sharp, always flicking to the mirrors like he was watching more than the road. The resort was exactly as promised. Pastel stucco buildings, 3 pools scattered across the property, and the ocean waiting just beyond. It wasn't luxury, but it didn't need to be. They greeted us with frosty drinks that melted to syrup in minutes, and still, God, they tasted like reward. The first 2 days were pure bliss. We overslept, sprawled by the pool, drank too much at dinner, and walked back to our room dizzy with salt air and rum. I remember Emily's cheeks glowing from the sun as she curled against me, waves echoing through the window, and thinking, this is the reset we needed. But by the third day, I started to itch with restlessness. I've never been good at just sitting still. The walls of the resort, even painted bright and warm, began to feel like barriers. I wanted to see more, go further. That morning, after a heavy breakfast of fruit and too much coffee, we arranged for a shuttle into a nearby town to rent a car. Our driver this time was older, with a weathered face and eyes that looked like they'd seen more than he'd ever admit. When we told him we were from Chicago, he chuckled. Frío allá, muy frío. Then his tone shifted. In halting English, he warned us, stay near coast, okay? Safe there. Jungle, small towns, not safe, bad people. You understand? Emily's head bobbed quickly. Yes, we understand. I shrugged it off with a smile, but his voice lingered in my head. It didn't sound like a casual warning. It sounded like pleading. The rental place wasn't much, just a garage with a sign nailed above it. No gleaming fleet, just a few tired compacts. We got a white Nissan Versa with scratches down the side. Emily leaned in close, whispering, at least it has air conditioning. As soon as we pulled onto the road, freedom settled over me. The highway stretched endlessly, hugging the coastline with glimpses of ocean flashing through palm trees. We passed through Eldora, a scatter of painted houses, fruit stalls, kids chasing each other barefoot. Stray dogs sprawled in the shade, lifting their heads lazily as we drove by. See? I said, glancing at Emily, grinning. This is the real Mexico, not just the resort bubble. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her hand kept tapping against her leg, restless. By afternoon, we reached the edges of another town, smaller, quieter. Just beyond it, I spotted a wide dirt road cutting into the jungle. Rugged, a little washed out, but drivable. Curiosity sparked like a match. I slowed the car. What do you think? Want to check it out? Emily's lips pressed tight. It doesn't look safe. But I was already turning the wheel. Something about that dirt road pulled at me, the way a door ajar in a dark hallway makes you want to peek inside even when you know better. Let's check it out, I said, trying to sound casual, though my pulse picked up. Emily frowned, gripping the armrest. In a rental car? Seriously, Alex? We'll wreck it. It's fine, I insisted, grinning like I could convince her with charm. We'll just go a little way, see where it goes. She sighed, the kind of sigh that meant she'd already lost the argument, and folded her arms tight against her chest. I turned the wheel and the Nissan jolted violently as we left pavement behind. The sound of gravel snapping under the tires filled the air as the jungle swallowed us whole. The road narrowed almost immediately, dirt pressing up in clouds behind us, shadows flickering across the windshield as if the trees themselves leaned closer. The canopy above was thick, letting only ribbons of sunlight through. It was breathtaking, untamed, ancient. For a few minutes, I let myself get caught up in it. The freedom, the silence, the raw wildness. But Emily's tension radiated. She sat stiff as stone, eyes darting side to side like something was about to step out at any second. Okay, I said finally, chuckling to lighten it. You win. We'll turn around. Relief flickered across her face, and I started maneuvering for a three-point turn. That's when they appeared. 3 men emerged from the jungle like shadows detaching from the trees. My heart stuttered. They weren't hikers. They weren't workers. The way they moved, slow, purposeful, shoulders angled forward, felt wrong, predatory. Emily's nails dug into my arm. Alex. Just my name, but her voice broke on it. I stopped the car. One of them came straight to my window, muttering in rapid Spanish. His words rolled over me, sharp and insistent. I cracked the window an inch, forced a smile that felt paper thin. No hablo español, I stammered. His eyes narrowed, dark and unblinking. His tone sharpened. A single word repeated again and again. I understood it even before my brain translated. Dinero. Money. Another man rapped hard on Emily's window, the hollow thud echoing through the car. She flinched, clutching the strap across her chest like a lifeline. "Don't roll it down," I hissed. The third man stepped forward and my stomach dropped as he slid something from his pocket. A knife. Long, rusted, the kind that tells its story without words. "Alex." Emily's whisper cracked. Her eyes were wet, wide with terror. Something primal snapped loose inside me. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car leapt forward with a screech. The men shouted, fists pounding against the doors, palms slapping the glass as we jolted past. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the wheel. In the rear view, I saw them running, shrinking into dots, swallowed back into the jungle. Silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating, until the pavement reappeared beneath us. Only then did Emily's sobs break free, her face streaked with tears. "What the hell was that?" she choked. "Alex, we could have..." Her voice caught. "We could have been killed." My knuckles were bone white on the wheel. My throat was sand. I wanted to tell her we were okay, that it was over, but the words wouldn't form. All I managed was a hoarse whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The next day, we swore. No more adventures. No more dirt roads. The resort walls, once stifling, suddenly felt like safety. But temptation has a way of sneaking back in. One of the resort workers mentioned a cenote nearby, a natural pool hidden in the jungle. His smile was broad, his words warm. "Beautiful, safe, very close. You must see." Emily hesitated, chewing her lip. I saw the flicker in her eyes, though. The desire to believe him, to hold on to the idea of wonder instead of fear. Wasn't that why we'd come here? To experience beauty, not just sip watered-down cocktails at the bar? Against reason, against instinct, we caved. The road was narrower this time, signs pointing the way in cheerful painted letters. We followed them until they stopped, parking in a clearing where the dirt path continued on foot. The air was thick with damp earth and the drone of insects. For a while it was peaceful, enchanting even, like stepping into another world. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Not ours. Emily froze, her hand tightening around mine. "Alex, do you hear that?" Before I could answer, a man stepped out from the trees. His clothes were worn, his expression unreadable. He spoke in Spanish, gesturing for us to follow. No, I said quickly, shaking my head. "We're fine, gracias." But he switched to halting English, his voice oddly flat. "I take you, cenote, this way." He wasn't leading us toward the signs, and as he turned, his hand brushed the back pocket of his pants. That's when Emily tugged at me, whispering so faintly it was barely air. "Knife." I looked down. The handle of a blade jutted out. Adrenaline surged cold through my veins. I squeezed her hand hard. "Run!" We bolted. Branches lashed our arms, roots threatened to trip us. The man shouted, crashing through the brush behind, but he wasn't fast. "Don't stop!" I yelled as Emily stumbled, yanking her back up. When the car appeared through the trees, relief nearly blinded me. But before we could reach it, 3 more figures stepped out from another path, rushing us. They grabbed the handles, yanked at the doors, pounded on the glass with fists twisted in rage. Emily screamed, fumbling with the lock. My hands shook as I jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as one man slammed his fist into my window, spiderwebbing the glass with a sickening crack. I floored it. The car lurched, gravel spraying, figures shrinking behind us into shadow. Emily sobbed, clutching her knees to her chest. "I want to go home, Alex. Please, I want to go home right now." And for the first time, I didn't argue. I wanted nothing more than to vanish thousands of miles away. We returned the car that afternoon, half expecting someone to notice the cracked windshield, the dirt smeared over it like bruises. But no one did. Back at the resort, we barricaded ourselves in the room, only slipping out for meals. Even then, Emily's eyes flicked constantly over her shoulder, like she expected the jungle itself to follow us inside. When the plane finally lifted us back into Chicago's frozen sky, the cold never felt so much like salvation. Even now, years later, I can't walk through a quiet wooded trail without hearing phantom footsteps behind me. Emily refuses to travel abroad anymore. Sometimes I lie awake wondering if it was my fault, if my restless curiosity took something from her, from us. All I know is this: paradise isn't always what it seems. Step too far from the safety of what you know, and you might not find adventure. You might find a kind of fear that follows you home. I had never been much of a flyer. Even as a kid, just the sight of an airport was enough to make my palms damp and my throat dry. When we drove past O'Hare, I used to press my forehead against the window and watch the planes crawl across the runways, their huge bodies rumbling, their wings tilting like some mechanical birds about to take off. Instead of wonder, I felt this awful tightness in my chest, like the air was pressing me down. My mom used to tease me about it. "Ethan, you'll never leave Illinois if you can't get on a plane," she'd laugh, tapping me on the shoulder. She wasn't wrong. But I grew up and figured out a workaround. The road, long drives, long hours, just me and the highway. No cramped seats, no recycled air, no strangers brushing against me in tight aisles. Just my own two hands on the wheel, my playlist keeping me company, and the world sliding past at whatever pace I chose. So when my cousin Hannah called to tell me she'd been accepted to run in the Albany Marathon, I knew immediately I'd drive. No question. Hannah had been training for this for years. Missing it wasn't an option. She wasn't just my cousin. She was more like my sister. After her dad died when we were teenagers, we leaned on each other through some ugly years. Showing up for her wasn't just about a marathon, it was about us. When I mentioned my plan to Marcus, he almost spit out his beer. "Ethan, you realize that's, 14 hours on the road?" "Closer to 15 if you drive like a grandma," I shot back. He raised an eyebrow. "So, 16 for you?" I grinned. 14 for me." He shook his head, laughing. "You're insane, man. Just fly. $70, 2 hours. Boom, you're there." I leaned back, picturing the endless miles of open road. "And miss out on the freedom of the drive? You know me better than that." And he did. I liked the quiet trance of highways at night. I liked how the dark wrapped around the car until the dashboard glow was the only light in the world. But I also knew that in those hours, in those empty places, the mind could start to twist things. Darkness had a way of playing tricks. I left Chicago around 3 in the afternoon on Thursday. If all went well, I'd reach Albany between 5 and 6 the next morning. The plan was simple. Route 20, keep stops minimal. I remembered that road, long stretches of farmland, dying towns with boarded-up diners, stretches so silent you'd swear the world had emptied out. I'd packed like a soldier, snacks, bottled water, 2 thermoses of strong coffee within arm's reach. My phone sat on its mount, GPS glowing with a mocking countdown, 15 hours, give or take. The first leg was easy. The sun lowered behind me, throwing long shadows across the fields. By the time I hit Ohio, the sky was bruised purple and slipping into a heavy navy. I stopped around 8, filled the tank, stretched, and called Hannah while the pump clicked behind me. "You really left after work?" She laughed through the line. "You're insane." Yeah, I said, smiling. "But I'll be there in the morning. I want to see you at the starting line." Her voice softened. "Thanks, Ethan. Really, it means a lot." That carried me for a few hours, her gratitude humming in the back of my mind as steady as the tires on the asphalt. By midnight, I'd been driving 9 hours. The world outside was dead quiet. My headlights caught nothing but the fractured white lines of the highway. I had the music turned up, fingers drumming to the beat, anything to stay alert. That was when I saw the headlights. At first, I thought nothing of it. Cars came and went. But then I realized I hadn't seen another vehicle in at least 20 minutes. No glowing taillights ahead, no headlights behind, just me. And then suddenly, there they were, too bright, too close, flooding my mirror. "All right, buddy," I muttered, easing into the right lane to let them by. The vehicle sped up, pulling alongside me. An older pickup, late 90s maybe, the kind that had survived too many winters. Rust chewed the wheel wells, and the paint had dulled into a lifeless gray under the beams of the highway lights. But instead of passing, the truck slowed, just enough to keep pace with me. My bumper lined with theirs, their shadow clinging to me like it meant to stay. "What are you doing?" I whispered, frowning. I tapped the gas, pulling ahead. The second I did, the truck slipped into my lane, settling right behind me. Close, too close. The glare of its headlights swallowed my mirrors, blinding me white. My chest tightened, my palms dampened against the wheel. This wasn't normal. I pressed the accelerator, heart kicking faster. So did they. "Come on, man," I muttered, throat dry. "Just go around," I muttered under my breath, knuckles whitening against the wheel. My hands were slick with sweat, my grip clumsy but tight. I flicked the signal, slid into the left lane. The truck followed. My pulse thudded in my ears so loudly it drowned out the music. This wasn't just some impatient driver, this wasn't random. Whoever was behind that wheel, they were playing with me. The headlights flashed, high beams stabbing through my mirrors, flooding my eyes with white. My vision blurred. Then the engine roared. The truck surged forward, pulling alongside me. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped at the empty car, my voice cracking. The pickup swerved, its bulk drifting into my lane. My tires screamed against the shoulder as I jerked the wheel. "Jesus Christ!" I shouted, horn blaring. The truck cut hard in front of me. Brake lights flared red. I slammed my own brakes. My chest seized against the seatbelt. The tires shrieked and the wheel fought against my grip. My horn wailed uselessly into the night. The truck slowed, hazard lights ticking like a heartbeat. Then a hand shot out of the driver's side window, waving me toward the shoulder. Slow. Calm. Like an invitation. "No chance," I muttered, my voice shaking. The pickup drifted toward the edge of the road as if it was going to stop. That was my opening. I yanked the wheel, swerving into the left lane, and floored it. My sedan roared, the engine straining, the speedometer climbing, 80, 90, 100. For a moment, the truck's headlights disappeared into the dark behind me. My chest heaved. I thought maybe I'd shaken them. But then the glow returned. Closer. Faster. The pickup's engine howled, a guttural sound that rattled my bones, and the lights filled my mirror again. "Come on, come on, come on," I whispered, my throat dry, tongue thick against the roof of my mouth. Then, salvation. A green glow in the distance, an exit sign. I shot across the empty lanes, tires shrieking as I dove onto the ramp. At the bottom, a red light forced me to a screaming halt. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. For a split second, I believed I'd lost them. The night was quiet. The road behind me, empty. Then headlights crested the ramp. My stomach dropped like a stone. The truck pulled up beside me, slow and deliberate. The window rolled down with a mechanical whine. 3 figures sat inside. They weren't hiding behind bandanas or ski masks. These were worse, plastic faces, white and grinning, curled mustaches, hollow black eyes, V for vendetta masks. All 3 turned toward me at once. No words, just silence. A chill shivered up my spine, each vertebra sparking with electricity. My skin prickled, my mouth so dry I couldn't swallow. The light stayed red. I didn't care. I slammed the gas, tearing through the intersection. Horns erupted from the cross traffic, headlights flashing as cars skidded to avoid me. I barely noticed. I weaved across the main road, lungs burning until other vehicles appeared. Normal cars, normal people. Their presence felt like oxygen, like lifelines. In my mirror, the pickup hesitated at the red light. Then, almost casually, it turned in the opposite direction. I didn't let myself breathe until 20 minutes later, when I spotted the fluorescent glow of a Walmart sign. The lot was mostly empty, just a few RVs tucked into corners. I pulled in, killed the engine, and collapsed against the seat. My chest rose and fell in ragged bursts. My hands trembled so violently I had to clench them into fists. I don't even remember closing my eyes. Just the crushing weight of exhaustion, the adrenaline draining out of me until I slipped under. When I woke, daylight filled the car. The lot was buzzing with shoppers, carts clattering, kids whining, the ordinary rhythm of morning. My phone read 8:03 a.m. For one disoriented moment, I thought maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing. Just some nightmare born of too much caffeine and too little sleep. But my heart still carried the echo of that terror. And I knew. It had been real. I drove the rest of the way to Albany in silence. When I finally told Hannah what had happened, she covered her mouth, eyes wide. "Ethan, that's terrifying. Did you at least get their plates?" I shook my head. Didn't see one. Maybe it was missing. Or maybe... I hesitated, jaw tightening. Maybe I was too busy trying not to get killed. After the marathon, when the cheers and exhaustion had settled, I thought about going to the police, filing a report. But what would I say? That 3 masked men in an old pickup truck tried to run me off the road? With no license plate, no proof, it would go nowhere. Still, I can't get their faces out of my head. Not their real faces. The masks. Those plastic grins turned toward me in unison. Silent. Patient. Like they'd done it before. And maybe, just maybe, they'll do it again. I've never liked driving at night. Something about the way the darkness swallows the world outside the windshield makes me uneasy. But sometimes, you don't have a choice. That night in early March, the air was still winter sharp, cutting at any bit of exposed skin, and I was making the drive home from my friend Marcus's apartment in downtown Springfield. Marcus had pulled a handful of us together for a Tuesday evening hangout. Nothing rowdy, just takeout boxes spread across the coffee table, the smell of soy sauce and fried chicken lingering in the air while we lounged around, swapping stories. We talked about jobs, rent, relationships, the things that had slowly taken over since college. Marcus was the type who refused to let time or distance kill a friendship. He'd text relentlessly, send memes, insist on group dinners. It felt good being there, like stepping back into something familiar and easy. By the time I finally stood to leave, the clock was brushing midnight. I thought briefly about crashing at his place, but his one bedroom barely had space for him, and another friend had already claimed the couch. I figured the hour drive to Riverton wasn't so bad. Quiet roads, my own bed. Worth it. But the weather had other plans. As soon as I cleared the city limits, fog rolled in. At first it was just a soft haze, curling under the amber glow of street lamps, almost pretty. Then it thickened fast, a dense wall of gray that swallowed everything. My high beams only made it worse, light bouncing back into my eyes. The lane markers blurred, then vanished altogether. It felt like driving into nothing, like the world ended just a few feet ahead of my bumper. I cracked the window, letting a blast of cold slap my face, anything to push back the heaviness tugging at my eyelids. Work had drained me earlier, and hours of greasy food and laughter hadn't helped. My body wanted to shut down. To stay alert, I queued up an old playlist, songs I used to blast when I first got my license. Familiar, comforting, grounding. The road was lonely. Now and then, a semi would thunder past, its massive silhouette looming and then vanishing into the fog. Their plates hinted at faraway places, Wyoming, Tennessee. I caught myself wondering how those drivers kept themselves awake at this hour, barreling through the dark while the rest of the world slept. Around 1 a.m., my chest tightened. Through the soup of fog, I saw them. 2 faint red tail lights ahead, glowing where they shouldn't have been. They weren't lined up straight, but tilted like the car was straddling both the road and the shoulder. My heart jumped into my throat. Instinct took over. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching against damp asphalt, the car jerking sideways as I swerved. For one breathless second, I thought I was going to slam into it. Somehow, I stopped just short. My hands locked on the wheel, knuckles bloodless, adrenaline roaring in my veins. I sat there shaking, listening to the tick of my hazard lights and my own ragged breathing. The car ahead was a black sedan, its paint slick under the glow of my headlights. Slowly, almost deliberately, it rolled itself fully onto the shoulder, as if to clear the lane for me. Then the driver's side window hummed down. An arm slid out into the night air, pale in the beam of my headlights. It lifted, fingers curling in a lazy motion, beckoning me closer, signaling me to pull over. I froze. Every nerve in me screamed no, get back on the road, drive. But my mind lagged, still tangled in the shock of nearly rear-ending them. Maybe the driver was apologizing. Maybe they needed help. People broke down all the time on this stretch of highway. My hand moved almost against my will, nudging the wheel. Slowly, cautiously, I guided my car to the shoulder, leaving a good distance between us. I shifted into park, heartbeat drumming so loud it felt like it filled the cabin. The sedan ahead crept forward at a crawl, tires crunching against the gravel shoulder before veering off onto a narrow side road that branched from the highway. Its brake lights glowed faintly through the fog before it rolled to a full stop. My gut tightened. The driver's door opened. Through the haze and the harsh cone of my headlights, I saw a tall figure step out. He looked mid-30s maybe, lean, wearing a dark winter jacket and jeans. His stride was deliberate, unhurried. When his face finally came into focus, I caught the smile he wore. Friendly at first glance, but something in it felt stretched too wide, too eager, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. I lowered my window just a crack, enough for his words to slip through, but not enough for his hand to reach in. "Hey," he said. His tone was casual, but his voice carried a firmness that didn't match. "Rough night for driving, huh?" "Yeah," I said quickly. My voice sounded unnatural, tight even to me. "You heading far?" he asked, tilting his head like he was making small talk. "Home," I replied, leaving it at that, careful not to add detail. He nodded slowly. "Fog like this isn't safe. Visibility's garbage. You should probably pull over for a while, wait it out." "I'll be fine." I forced the words out, trying to keep my tone neutral. For a flicker of a second, his smile faltered. The corners of his mouth twitched as if irritation threatened to bleed through. "Then why'd you stop?" My pulse hammered. I scrambled for something that sounded believable. "Phone call," I lied. "Needed to check it real quick." His eyes narrowed slightly, scanning my face. He didn't believe me. I could feel it. The smirk that slid back across his mouth wasn't friendly at all. It was sharp, knowing. "I live just down the road," he said after a pause, his voice softer now, coaxing. "Wife and kid. 5 minutes tops. You could wait it out at my place. Safer than pushing through, you know?" My stomach knotted. I shook my head quickly. "Appreciate it, but I'll keep going." "You sure?" His voice dropped an octave, growing harder, colder. "Fog like this. Accidents happen. 10 times more likely to die in conditions like this. And you look tired, too." He leaned in slightly. "You should really think about your family before getting back on the road." The air seemed to leave my lungs. My skin prickled with cold. I hadn't mentioned family. I forced a smile, though my grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles ached. "Thanks. I'll be fine." His face changed then. The smile drained, leaving something harder, meaner. His stare bored into me, flat and unblinking. Then, subtly, his gaze flicked over his shoulder, back toward the sedan. That's when I noticed it. A shift in the passenger seat. A shadow moving, Someone else was inside. My breath caught. Before I could think, the man at my window lunged, grabbing my door handle and yanking hard. The locks held with a reassuring clunk, but panic tore through me like fire. The passenger door of the sedan flung open. Another man, heavier, bulkier, with a hood pulled low over his face, jumped out. He was gripping something, metal, thick, a baseball bat. "Get out of the car," the first man shouted, voice cracking with command. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires screeching as I shot backward, gravel spitting behind me. The second man lunged forward, swinging the bat, but the arc cut through empty air just shy of my fender. Heart pounding, I jerked the wheel hard, praying the car wouldn't fishtail into the ditch. The tires gripped. Somehow, miraculously, I realigned with the highway and floored the gas. My headlights carved 2 fragile tunnels in the fog, and I gripped that path like my life depended on it. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed to just keep going, to put as much distance as possible between me and them. The rest of that drive blurred. My chest felt crushed, breaths ragged and shallow. My hands shook so violently on the wheel I thought I might lose control. Every pair of headlights that appeared in my rearview mirror sent a jolt of terror through me. I kept imagining the black sedan re-emerging from the fog, chasing me down. It never did. When I finally reached Riverton, relief crashed over me like a wave. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, its bright fluorescent lights cutting through the night. I parked directly under them and just sat there, shaking, hands still locked around the steering wheel, trying to steady the frantic rhythm of my breathing. I thought about calling the police right then. But what could I say? 2 strangers tried to lure me off the road. One had a bat. Out in the middle of nowhere, in thick fog with no proof. By the time an officer arrived, they'd be long gone. Still, the next morning I filed a report. The officer on duty listened quietly, nodding now and then, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he told me I wasn't the first. There had been similar calls in recent months. Drivers waved down by cars parked in the fog, coaxed onto side roads, unnerving encounters that escalated just before the victims escaped. So far, no arrests. That answer should have comforted me, confirmation that I hadn't imagined it. But it didn't. It made it worse. Now, whenever I take that stretch of highway, especially in bad weather, I can't shake the memory of that night. The too wide smile that never reached his eyes. The silent figure waiting in the passenger seat. The sound of my door handle rattling under his grip, and the thought I can never quite silence. What would have happened if I'd rolled my window down just a little further? I don't know if those men ever stopped someone else, or if someone else wasn't as lucky as me. But I know this much. I'll never ever stop for a stranger on the side of the road again. I've never been a morning person. Anyone who knows me would tell you that before coffee I'm half dead, groggy, irritable, and not fit to be around. But in the winter of 2019, I didn't have the luxury of slow mornings. Back then, I was living in Columbus, Ohio, working as a regional technician for a logistics company. Most Saturdays, my shift started at 5 a.m. sharp, which meant I was usually on the road by 4 hours. I used to tell myself the job was just temporary, something to cover rent until I figured out what I really wanted to do. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. The one thing I genuinely didn't mind was the drive itself. There was something oddly soothing about being out on the interstate before sunrise. No rush hour, no distractions, just me, the hum of the engine, and endless stretches of empty blacktop sliding beneath the headlights. That particular Saturday morning was brutal. The thermometer in my car read 19 degrees, and the windshield was coated with ice so thick I had to let the defroster run for 10 minutes before I could even see out. My apartment had been silent when I left, my roommate still asleep, the hallways dark, the world outside frozen and still. When I finally merged onto I-71, I actually thought to myself, this is one of those mornings where nothing ever happens. The highway was nearly deserted, just a handful of cars scattered across 3 lanes. My old playlist was running low, some half-forgotten indie tracks from college days, and my mind was already sinking into dread at the 8-hour shift waiting for me. I had no clue that within an hour, I'd find myself in one of the most terrifying situations of my life. I was cruising in the middle lane at about 75, probably a little faster than I should have been, because I was already running late. That's when I noticed headlights gaining on me fast in the left lane. At first, I brushed it off. People speed all the time. But this car wasn't just speeding, it was flying. 90, maybe even 100. As it roared past, I caught a clear glimpse. A late-model gray Honda Accord coupe. The kind of car you'd lose track of in a crowded parking lot. Forgettable, except for the driver. He wasn't just passing me. He was staring. A long, deliberate stare that clamped my chest tight. Even in the dim light, I caught sharp features, messy dark hair, and eyes that felt too cold, too focused. That alone unsettled me. But then I saw the back seat. There was a woman there, young, pale-faced, caught in the sweep of highway lights as they flickered over her. She was pounding on the window with both fists, her mouth wide open in a silent scream. For half a second, my brain rejected it. A prank? Some weird joke? Then the driver's arm shot backward, swinging at her. The car swerved. She flailed, throwing her arms up in desperate defense. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a game. This was real. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles went white. Oh my God, he's hitting her, I muttered out loud, voice thin and shaky. For a moment I froze, my car steady at 75 while my brain tried to catch up to what my eyes had just seen. I was watching an abduction, in real time. Adrenaline snapped me out of it. I pressed the gas, closing the distance, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I could still see her, her frantic arms, her wild eyes, the raw panic etched into her movements. Jesus Christ, I whispered, fumbling for my phone. My thumb shook so badly I almost dropped it. I jabbed at the screen, hit 911, pressed it to my ear. The line rang once. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, steady, inhumanly calm, compared to the chaos in my chest. There's a kidnapping happening right in front of me. The words tumbled out too fast, clumsy and desperate. I'm on I-71 southbound just outside Columbus near exit 108, a gray Honda Accord coupe. The driver, he's got a woman in the back. She's trying to get out, he's hitting her. Sir, I need you to stay calm, the operator said. Can you confirm the make and model again? Yes. Honda Accord, gray, coupe, early 2000s, maybe 2002. He's doing about 90. I'm right behind him right now. Are you in a safe position? The dispatcher asked. I glanced up. The brake lights on the Accord flared bright red. Too sudden, too deliberate. My stomach dropped. Oh God, I muttered into the phone. He knows I'm behind him. Sir, do not engage directly, the dispatcher warned. Just keep your distance. But it was already too late. The Accord slowed hard, nearly stopping in the middle lane. My tires screamed against the asphalt as I slammed the brakes, the steering wheel jerking in my hands. Then, in one fluid, terrifying motion, the driver's door flew open. He stepped out. The man. The one with the cold eyes. His silhouette was stark in the headlights, and in his hand, something dark, metallic, catching the glow. I couldn't tell if it was a gun, a crowbar, or something worse. My breath hitched. Sir, what's happening? The dispatcher pressed. He's coming at me, I choked out, voice cracking with panic. The man broke into a sprint, barreling straight toward my car, arm raised. Instinct smothered thought. I slammed the gear into reverse and floored the gas. My engine howled, tires screeched, and I shot backward down the empty highway. My chest felt like it would burst, every nerve in my body screaming, move, move, move. He stopped mid-run, frozen in the road, watching me retreat. Just watching. I couldn't think. I slammed the gear into drive, swerved wide around him, and tore past the Accord. My hands trembled so violently on the wheel I could barely steer straight. "Keep going, sir," the dispatcher urged. "State troopers are being dispatched to your location now. Can you confirm your direction of travel?" I'm still southbound," I gasped, my voice barely holding steady. "I just passed him. Oh God, he's following me now." Because he was. The Accord's headlights filled my rear view, blinding and predatory. Within seconds he was on my tail, swerving side to side, closing the gap like a predator toying with its prey. I pushed 95, maybe more, but he stayed glued to me, matching every move. "Stay calm," the dispatcher repeated, their voice unnervingly level against the chaos unraveling in mine. "There's a unit less than 2 miles ahead. Keep your speed, keep your distance, do not stop." The next 5 minutes stretched into eternity. My chest ached, my palms slick with sweat, every muscle locked so tight I thought I might seize up. I kept expecting the Accord to slam into my bumper or worse, see the driver lean out the window with a gun. Every second my eyes darted between the road ahead and the mirror where those headlights bore down like hunting eyes. "Sir," the dispatcher said, "we've got a trooper stage just past mile marker 96. Can you confirm when you see him?" I swallowed, throat bone dry, scanning the shoulder like my life depended on it. And then, blessed light. Red and blue strobes cut through the darkness. "There, he's there!" I nearly screamed. The cruiser pulled onto the interstate as I sped past. The Accord tried to swerve, but there was nowhere to go. Within seconds, the trooper was on his bumper, siren wailing, lights flooding the highway. I veered into the right lane, my pulse thundering in my ears, watching in disbelief as the chase shifted from me to him. The Accord jerked toward the median, tires grinding in the grass before skidding to a stop. The driver leapt out, but the trooper was faster. Gun drawn, command sharp. The man dropped to his knees, hands locked behind his head. I coasted forward and stopped a safe distance away, chest heaving, breath fogging up the glass. My whole body felt detached, numb, like I was floating outside of myself. Another cruiser arrived minutes later. One officer approached my window, flashlight beam cutting into my eyes. "Sir, you the caller?" Yeah, I stammered. I was behind him the whole time. "You did good," he said firmly. "Just sit tight." I watched, frozen, as the second officer opened the Accord's rear door. The woman stumbled out. Her face was streaked with tears, her wrists raw and red from restraints, her clothes torn at the shoulder. Bruises darkened her skin. She collapsed into the officer's arms, sobbing so hard her body shook. My chest clenched as if someone had grabbed my ribs in a vice. She couldn't have been older than 22. Later, after statements and paperwork, I learned the rest. Her name was Rachel Dawson, a junior at Ohio State. The driver, Kyle Bennett, was her ex-boyfriend. He'd shown up at her apartment unannounced. When she refused to let him in, he forced the door, assaulted her, and dragged her into his car. The child locks kept her trapped. She told police she thought he was going to kill her. The thought still makes me sick, that if I hadn't been running late, if I hadn't looked into that back seat, if I'd told myself it wasn't my business, she might not have made it out alive. When the officers finally let me go, Rachel tried to thank me through her tears. She looked at me, voice shaking, and whispered, You saved my life." I couldn't find words. I just nodded, because anything I could have said would have broken under the weight of what almost happened. It's been years since that morning. The memory hasn't dulled. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, I catch myself scanning the cars around me, just in case. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see her pounding on that glass, desperate, terrified, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. The scariest part isn't that it happened, it's how close it came to being invisible. I've always thought of myself as a night person. In my 20s, most of my jobs kept me out late, bartending, warehouse shifts, even a brief stint at a gas station. Driving home at 2 or 3 in the morning felt calming back then. The world was hushed. The roads stretched out like they belonged only to me. Empty highways, the occasional pool of light under a street lamp, the steady drone of my old engines. It almost felt meditative. But since 2020, I can't look at nighttime driving the same way. When the pandemic hit, I was working as a respiratory therapist at St. Mary's Medical Center in upstate New York. It was brutal. Some weeks I worked 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours straight, especially when we were short-staffed. My coworkers and I used to joke we couldn't tell when one day ended and the next began, but underneath the laughter, we knew it wasn't really funny. The virus blurred everything into a haze of fear, exhaustion, and grief. I lived in a small town called Riverbend, about half an hour north of the hospital. The fastest route home was the Adirondack Parkway, a long winding road cutting straight through miles of forest. In daylight it was tolerable, quiet, even beautiful in spots. But at night, nothing but black woods pressing in on both sides. You could go 10, 15 minutes without seeing a single headlight. My parents worried constantly, especially my dad. He was the type who carried worry quietly until it boiled over in clipped, serious words. One evening during a rare break, I called home from the hospital. "Don't push yourself too hard, Danny," he told me. His voice was low, the way it got when he'd been holding something in too long. "You've always thought you were invincible, but you're not." "I'm fine, Dad," I muttered, leaning back in the break room chair, mask pulled down, coffee going cold beside me. "I'm exhausted, yeah, but everyone's exhausted. It's the job right now." He paused, then said, "Promise me something. When you're driving home after those shifts, don't stop for anyone on the road. Not even for a second, you hear me?" I laughed softly. "Dad, what are the odds? You make it sound like I'm in some horror movie." But he didn't laugh. It was late April, a Tuesday night, or technically Wednesday morning around 2:30 when I finally dragged myself out of the hospital. My body felt hollowed out, fluorescent lights still burning in my vision, the mask leaving angry lines across my face. Walking through the lot, I felt more like a ghost than a person. The air was damp, the pavement shining faintly from earlier rain. I climbed into my silver Camry, tossed my backpack onto the passenger seat, and sat there for a moment with the engine off, breathing the silence. Since lockdown started, the roads were emptier than I'd ever seen them. Nobody went out unless they absolutely had to. The drive began like it always did. Just me, the hum of tires against asphalt, headlights slicing through mist that hung low over the trees. 10 minutes in, my mind had gone fuzzy, body moving on autopilot. That's when I saw it. A pulsing red light on the shoulder ahead. At first, I thought it was a cruiser, maybe a state trooper. But as I rolled closer, I realized it wasn't a police light at all. It was one of those portable roadside SOS beacons, the kind you keep in case of a breakdown. Next to it sat a dark SUV, angled awkwardly, hazards off. My foot eased off the gas. My dad's warning came back sharp and clear, "Don't stop for anyone, not even a second." But then I saw the figure. A man standing near the SUV, arms waving, body language urgent. Something inside me, guilt maybe, or just the weight of exhaustion, made me pull over anyway. I slowed to a stop a few feet ahead of the SUV, flicked on my hazards, and stepped out. "Hey, you okay?" I called, voice carrying across the damp, empty night. The man walked quickly toward me, early 30s, I guessed. Light brown skin, jeans, a black hoodie. A surgical mask covered half his face, making his expression impossible to read. "Thank God, man," he said quickly, voice carrying an accent I couldn't quite place. His shoulders slumped like he'd been standing there forever. "My battery died. Been stuck almost an hour. Nobody stopped." "You have jumper cables?" I asked automatically, though my stomach was tightening. He shook his head, raising both hands. No. And my phone's dead too. Please, can I borrow yours? Just for one call. My brother's in Albany." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to, but what was I supposed to do? Leave a guy stranded in the middle of nowhere? My dad's warning was still rattling in my head, but guilt pressed harder. With a sigh, I unlocked my phone, opened the dialer, and held it out. "Here. Make it quick." "Gracias, man, thank you." He nodded gratefully, took the phone, and started walking back toward the SUV, lifting it to his ear. That's when I noticed the driver's side door, wide open. Something about it nagged at me. "Mind if I take a look?" I called out. Yeah, go ahead," he said distractedly, turning slightly away, like he was focusing on the call. I walked over and leaned into the SUV. The first thing I saw was the key, still in the ignition. My brows knitted. Who leaves their keys in when the battery's dead? On impulse, I twisted them just a little. The dashboard lit up instantly. "What the hell?" I muttered, trying the radio. It crackled to life. The hazard switch clicked. Everything worked. The battery wasn't dead at all. And in that moment, ice ran through me. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a trap. Before I could pull back, arms snaked around my neck from the back seat. A voice, young and cracking, hissed right in my ear. "Don't move!" Adrenaline detonated in my chest. I thrashed wildly, slamming my elbow back until I felt the grip falter. "Hey!" The man outside barked, running toward us. His tone wasn't worried, it was furious. I bolted. Ripping free, I stumbled out of the SUV and sprinted toward my Camry. My pulse roared so hard I couldn't even hear my own footsteps. Someone was chasing me. I could feel the ground shaking with their stride. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and jammed the key in the ignition. The engine screamed alive just as something exploded behind me. Glass rained across the back seat. I floored it. I didn't stop until I screeched into my driveway, hands trembling so badly I could barely pull the key from the ignition. My rear windshield was shattered, a fist-sized hole punched through it with spiderweb cracks radiating out. They still had my phone, my contacts, my banking apps, my entire digital life. I couldn't even call the police from my number. I stumbled inside, grabbed the dusty landline, and dialed 911 with fingers that wouldn't stay steady. 2 officers showed up about half an hour later. I told them everything. How the guy had flagged me down, how someone was waiting in the SUV, how a shot had been fired when I escaped. "Did you get a good look at them?" one asked. "Not enough. Just the one outside, early 30s maybe. Hispanic, hoodie, mask." The younger cop exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Classic setup. We've had a few roadside scams like this, but not with gunfire. You're lucky, man, real lucky." But luck didn't stop what came after. By morning, my bank apps had already been drained, every cent in my savings gone. The Bitcoin I'd held onto for years, transferred to untraceable wallets. AT confirmed no call had ever been made from my phone that night. He hadn't dialed anyone, just pretended. And then, a week later, it escalated. I woke to my mom's panicked voice calling my name. My dad stood at the back door with a flashlight, his face pale. "Someone's in the yard," he whispered. We froze together, listening. I could swear I heard the crunch of footsteps just past the tree line. Shadows moved where there shouldn't have been any. But by the time the police came again, the yard was empty. Nothing. That's when it hit me. They'd had access to my phone before I locked it. My address, my family's names, everything. It's been years since then. No arrests, no phone recovered, no money returned. Just silence, like the whole thing had been swallowed into the dark. But sometimes, when I'm driving home late, I'll catch a flicker of red in the distance, like that SOS light blinking on the shoulder. And I don't stop anymore. Not for anyone, because I know what waits in the dark. I've always been the kind of person who somehow ended up with the responsibility no one else wanted. In high school, I was the one holding on to everyone's keys, making sure wallets and phones didn't get left behind, and driving the group home when the night stretched too far. That didn't magically change when I got older. It just grew heavier, more permanent. At 24, living out in the middle of rural Pennsylvania, I'd learned how to balance a job at the local auto shop with a life that seemed slower than the rest of the world. Nights out were rare. Fun had to be planned like a road trip. The nearest bar, concert, or party was always at least a half-hour drive away, and someone had to pay the price of sobriety to get everyone else home safely. More often than not, that someone was me. That night, God, I'll never get it out of my head, I was the driver again, hauling my 3 closest friends back home. Aaron was the loud one, impulsive, always ready to push a joke too far. Leah wore her emotions like a neon sign, never subtle. And Tyler? Well, Tyler had this strange ability to drink himself into a trance. Sometimes he looked so far gone you couldn't tell if he was meditating or on the verge of collapsing. The plan had been simple. Drive into Millerton, a nearby college town that had just enough bars and music venues to keep us entertained, stay until closing, then cruise back along Route 68, the long, unlit 2-lane highway that sliced through farmland and endless forest. I'd driven that stretch more times than I could count, but that night, something about it felt off, like the dark pressed in closer than usual. The clock on my dash blinked 2:47 a.m. as we rolled onto Route 68. The bars had just shut down, and my passengers were a mess. Aaron and Tyler were half yelling, half singing some old rock anthem, voices cracking while Leah was curled into a miserable ball in the back seat, groaning about how much she regretted her last shot. "Hey, driver," Aaron slurred, leaning forward and tapping the side of my face with his clammy hand. "You're the hero tonight, the sober knight of the countryside. Shut up and let me focus," I muttered, batting his hand away. Leah suddenly let out a sharp groan. "I need to pee," she whimpered, her voice breaking like she might cry. "You'll have to wait," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "We're 20 minutes from home." No." She dragged out the word like a petulant kid. "I can't. Seriously, I'm going to explode." Aaron burst into a wheezing laugh, choking on his own spit, while Tyler stayed silent, staring out the window like the trees rushing past were hypnotizing him. I gripped the wheel tighter. "Leah, I'm not pulling over in the middle of nowhere, hold it." But then I felt it too. The dull, uncomfortable pressure in my own bladder. The kind you can ignore until someone else starts complaining about theirs. Leah's whining had escalated into actual tears, her voice piercing through Aaron's laughter, and eventually I let out a long, frustrated sigh. "Fine," I muttered. "But make it quick. Just the woods, in and out." Aaron clapped his hands like a kid. "Adventure time." I eased the car onto the gravel shoulder where a thin break in the tree line opened to nothing but blackness. My headlights barely cut through the dense brush, just a pale, narrow beam swallowed by the dark. Leah stumbled out first, clutching her phone in one hand like it was a flashlight or maybe just a lifeline. She shot Aaron a glare. "Don't you dare leave me alone out here." "I'm not babysitting," he chuckled, already unbuckling his seatbelt. "Go behind the trees," I said, annoyed. "Don't wander." 2 minutes, I'm staying here," Tyler mumbled, slumping deeper into the passenger seat, eyes already closing. I decided to head to the opposite side of the road for some privacy. I hated the idea of anyone nearby when I relieved myself, just how I was wired. I slipped into the trees, unzipped quickly, and listened to Aaron and Leah's muffled laughter somewhere behind me. When I finished, I zipped up, brushed damp leaves from my shoes, and walked back toward the car. Aaron's voice carried faintly, still singing off-key, the radio humming low through the open door. Tyler swayed in the front seat, looking half asleep. But Leah wasn't back yet. At first I figured she was just taking her time, maybe trying not to stumble. But after 5 minutes ticked by, a restless knot twisted in my gut. "Leah?" I called out, stepping away from the car, my voice cutting into the silence of the trees. My voice barely carried beyond the tree line, swallowed by the black tangle of branches and wind. Somewhere deeper in the brush, Aaron's laughter cut through the night, loud and careless. "Leah, Hurry up before the boogeyman gets you, he hollered, his voice dripping with mockery. Shut up, I snapped, sharper than I meant. My own voice betrayed me, thin, nervous. I waited another minute. Nothing. Just the restless whisper of wind moving through the trees, the kind of sound that made you feel watched. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong. I yanked open the glove compartment, pulled out my flashlight, and shoved it on. The beam cut through the dark in a narrow cone, dust particles dancing in the light. Aaron, come with me. Now, he groaned, stumbling out of the brush to join me. Man, you're such a dad sometimes. She's fine. She's not answering, I said flatly, the words dropping like stones. That's not fine. The trees thinned as we pushed forward, opening into a strange patch of overgrown crops, tall stalks swaying against one another, rustling with every movement we made. My flashlight sliced a path through them, the dirt row visible just ahead. Leah, I shouted, louder than I'd intended. My voice cracked, echoing against the stalks. Aaron, still smirking, called out too. Leah, careful, you're about to get eaten by children of the corn. I wanted to throttle him. The joke hung in the air like a curse, and then over his laughter I heard it. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, not ours, not Leah's. I froze, my arm shooting across Aaron's chest like a seatbelt. Shh. What? He whispered, his grin faltering. Listen. The steps stopped. Dead silence fell, pressing down on us, broken only by the brittle rattle of dry stalks in the wind. Leah, I tried again, softer, my throat tight. No response. We pushed forward anyway, instinct pulling us deeper into the field. Then suddenly the rows broke apart into a narrow clearing, just wide enough for two people to walk shoulder to shoulder. My flashlight swept left. More stalks. Right. Something shifted. 3 slow, deliberate steps. The crops parted. And then he stepped into view. Not Leah. Not Aaron. Not anyone I knew. A man, maybe mid-40s. His face was half hidden in shadow, but his eyes caught the beam of my flashlight, glinting like an animal's. His clothes were dark, caked with dirt, clinging to him as if he'd been living in them for weeks. He stood unnaturally still, head cocked slightly, watching us with the patience of a predator. Aaron's laughter died instantly, cut clean like someone had flipped a switch. My heart slammed against my ribs, instinct screaming at me to run. I didn't think. I bolted, tearing through the stalks, branches clawing at my arms, breath ripping out of me. Aaron's footsteps thundered behind me. It couldn't have been more than 10 seconds before the car came into view, headlights glowing like a lifeline. Tyler was still slumped against the passenger window, half asleep, barely stirring as I yanked open the door. "Start the car!" Aaron yelled, breathless. But then I froze. Aaron wasn't alone. He was dragging Leah. Her body hung limp, one arm dangling, hair matted with blood. A thin crimson gash stretched across her forehead, glistening under the beam of my flashlight. "What the hell happened?" I cried, rushing to lift her into the back seat. Aaron's voice shook, stripped of all humor. He had her. I saw him. That guy. We weren't imagining it. He was dragging her. Dragging her. His words tumbled out, jagged and desperate. I don't know if she was passed out or worse. I yelled at him and he looked up at me. Aaron's voice cracked. He smiled, and then he ran, dropped her, and ran. Bile rose hot in my throat as my hands fumbled with the ignition. My palms were sticky with her blood. The engine roared alive. The next 10 minutes were chaos. Aaron shouting directions, me yelling back, Tyler groaning awake as Leah stirred faintly, whispering broken nonsense. Her blood smeared across my hands, across the seat, soaking into everything. "Nearest hospital," Aaron demanded, his voice high, frantic. "I know," I screamed, my voice splintering under panic. The road stretched on endlessly, headlights slicing through the dark void. My eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights appear, or worse, that figure walking behind us. Leah whimpered. a sound so small it barely filled the car. Then she went still again. "Stay with us, Leah," Aaron begged, his voice cracking into something raw. We burst through the ER doors just past 3:15 a.m. Nurses rushed to meet us, voices overlapping, sharp and urgent. They pulled her onto a stretcher, whisking her away before we could follow. I stood in the sterile hallway, my hands still stained with her blood, my whole body trembling as if it couldn't stop. Hours passed before someone finally told us she was stable. A concussion. Stitches. No memory of what happened. It should have been a relief, but when Aaron leaned close, pale and hollow-eyed, his whisper turned my stomach cold. I saw his face, man. Not all of it, but enough. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't panicking. He was smiling. Like this wasn't the first time. Leah never remembered. None of it. Not the party. Not the crops. Not the man. She brushed it all off as too much alcohol, a clumsy fall in the dark. Nothing more. But Aaron and I knew better. And every time I drive down Route 68, I feel it. The heavy weight pressing in from the dark fields, the certainty that someone is still out there, waiting. Because people don't just vanish for 5 minutes and come back broken. Not without someone else being there. I've always hated long drives at night. Something about the way the road stretches out into blackness makes the world feel hollow, like you're the only person left awake on Earth. But sometimes you don't get a choice. Back then I was 27, working as an assistant manager at a small hardware store in Massachusetts. The hours weren't bad, steady enough, but they swallowed most of my life. When my uncle in upstate Pennsylvania called and invited me for a summer family gathering, I didn't even hesitate. He was more than just an uncle. He'd stepped in when my dad wasn't around, filling in gaps I didn't realize existed until I got older. Life had pulled us apart. Sure, but saying no wasn't an option. The plan was simple enough. Leave after my shift, make the 6 to 7 hour drive, and spend the week at his place. My cousin Matt was already there with his family. I hadn't seen him in nearly 10 years. Just the idea of a backyard table cluttered with beers, everyone laughing under the string lights, felt like salvation compared to the sterile silence of my apartment. I clocked out around 5:30, still in dusty jeans, and swung through a drive-thru for a burger greasy enough to stain the paper bag. My Jeep Cherokee wasn't much to look at, and it had quirks that drove me nuts. The driver's side window sometimes jammed halfway up. The AC made a noise like it was chewing gravel, but it had gotten me through enough miles that I trusted it. I had music queued on my phone, a cooler with sodas rattling in the back, and what looked like a full tank on the gauge. By the time I crossed into New Hampshire, the late August sun was dipping low, turning the sky into streaks of burning orange and bruised purple. The heat lingered just enough that I cranked the windows down and let the warm air whip through the cabin. For a moment, I actually thought, this isn't so bad. This is peaceful. But long drives have a way of chewing at your brain. 1 minute you're drumming your fingers to a song you've heard 100 times, and the next you're replaying old arguments or picturing the way your apartment feels too empty when you turn the key at night. Around 9 more hours, I called Matt to keep myself awake. "Dude," he answered, voice breaking through the static. "You better get here tonight. Uncle Dave's been manning the grill since 6. He'll probably be out cold before midnight, but everyone keeps asking about you." "I'll make it," I promised, stifling a yawn. "GPS says 1, but if I push it, maybe 12:30. Save me a burger." Safe driving, man. These roads dark as hell. I almost nailed a deer out by the border last year. Keep those high beams ready. We hung up, and I cranked the volume, letting the music punch holes in the silence. The interstate thinned into state highways, then narrowed again into lonely 2-lane stretches. Trees pressed in on both sides like walls, their shadows devouring everything my headlights didn't touch. The kind of darkness that feels heavy, alive almost. By midnight, my eyelids were fighting me. I had that jittery, hollow buzz you get from too much caffeine on too little sleep. That's when the low fuel light blinked on with that insistent chime. Seriously? I muttered. I'd filled the tank 2 days ago and barely driven since. Either the gauge was lying again or there was a leak I hadn't noticed. I told myself to relax. No reason to panic. And then, like a lifeline, a blue service sign appeared. Gas station at the next exit. Relief rushed through me so fast I laughed out loud. The exit ramp curled away from the highway, and immediately the air shifted. No traffic, no streetlights, just black trees rising tall and tight on either side, their branches clawing at the sky. "All right," I whispered, more to hear my own voice than anything else. "Couple miles, grab gas, back on the road. Easy." But before I even reached the 2nd-mile marker, the Jeep began to cough. The steering wheel rattled in my hands, the engine sputtered like it was drowning, and then, without ceremony, it died. I coasted to the shoulder, the silence around me swallowing the last hum of the tires until I sat there, helpless in the dark. I sat gripping the wheel, every muscle locked tight, as the silence pressed in. The forest wasn't silent, not really. There were crickets chirping in quick bursts, frogs croaking low and steady, the occasional dry rustle of leaves. But the absence of anything human was overwhelming. No cars in the distance, no faint hum of traffic, no porch lights glowing through the trees. Just me, stuck on some nameless road after midnight, swallowed by woods that felt endless. I fumbled for my phone, relieved to see a bar or two of service. Dialing AAA felt like clinging to a lifeline. "Roadside assistance, how can we help?" The dispatcher's voice cracked faintly through static. "My car's out of gas," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Route 214, about 2 miles past the last highway exit." "No problem, sir. We'll dispatch a driver. Estimated time 30 minutes. Stay with your vehicle." "Please, hurry," I muttered, already picturing 30 minutes stretching into forever out here. Easier said than done. I tried distracting myself with my phone, but the signal kept dropping. Every text failed to send. The battery glared back at me. 38%. My thumb tapped the screen anyway, desperate for connection. Finally, cursing under my breath, I tossed it onto the passenger seat and stepped out, leaning against the Jeep's hood. The metal was still warm under my palms. That was when I heard it. Not the quick, frantic scrabble of a rabbit. Not the flutter of wings. Something heavier. Slower. Footsteps, measured, deliberate, crunching on the forest floor. I froze, my breath hitching sharp in my throat. My brain scrambled for something rational. Deer, maybe. A moose. Hell, even a bear would make more sense than the thought creeping in. But then, cutting through the night, came a sound too sharp, too intentional. Clap. I blinked. My mouth went dry. That wasn't wildlife. That was someone. "Hello?" I called before I could stop myself. My voice sounded wrong in the dark, too fragile, snatched up by the trees and smothered. Silence answered. Every instinct screamed at me to get back inside, and I obeyed, stumbling into the Jeep, slamming the lock button and cranking the stubborn driver's window closed with trembling hands. I slid low into the seat, pulse hammering so hard it shook my vision. "It's nothing. Just nerves. You're overtired. Don't lose it now." Then came the footsteps again. Slower this time. Closer. I dared a glance over the dash. And that's when I saw it. Something leaned just beyond the tree line, 20 feet ahead. A pale face, or what might have been a face peering out. The head tilted slightly, watching, or at least facing me. The eyes looked wrong, dull and glassy, like marbles pressed too deep into shadow. The skin was stretched thin, too smooth, almost waxy. The mouth, if it was a mouth, hung in an off-kilter way, slack, unnatural. I couldn't breathe. My brain clawed for answers. Maybe someone lost. Some messed up prank. But every instinct told me no. It didn't move like a person. It didn't feel like one. I ducked behind the wheel, clutching the seatbelt strap in white-knuckled fists. "Stay quiet. Don't move." Then came the rattle, the sound of the passenger door handle being tested. First soft, then harder. The metallic clink sent ice down my spine. I pressed myself back into the seat, waiting for the window to shatter, for the fabric top to rip open. And then, I felt it. Fingers, cold, deliberate, curling into the back of my shirt. I screamed before I even realized it, thrashing against the seat, clawing at nothing. And then, light. Bright, flooding everything. Headlights cut through the dark as a diesel engine growled up behind me. A pickup truck. The grip vanished instantly. I whipped around. Nothing. Just trees swallowing the dark again. The 8AA truck idled behind me, its beams painting the forest white. The driver climbed out, broad-shouldered, reflective vest catching the light. His voice was steady, casual, as if he hadn't just walked into my nightmare. "You the one who called about gas?" Yes, oh my God," I stammered, nearly falling out of the Jeep. I pointed toward the tree line with a shaking hand. There was something out there. It grabbed me, I swear to God. "Easy," he said, palms raised, his tone gentle but firm. "You're all right. Let's just get you fueled up." Something in his calm steadiness cut through my panic. I hovered close, every muscle coiled, while he retrieved a gas can and poured it into the tank like it was the most ordinary job in the world. "Long night, huh?" he said with a faint smile. "You don't understand," I whispered. "There was something in those woods, pale, watching me. I'm not crazy." He didn't laugh, didn't scoff. He just nodded once, eyes still on the gas can. "Lot of strange things in these woods," he said softly. "Best to keep moving." When he finished, I thanked him at least a dozen times, my words tumbling out frantic. He gave me a firm nod, climbed back into his truck, and with a roar of the engine pulled away. And then I was alone again. The silence crashed back, thicker than before. I stared at the spot where that face had been. No footprints, no snapped branches, just blackness. I climbed back into the Jeep, locked the doors again, and drove until the highway's hum felt like salvation. I made it to my uncle's house just before 2 in the morning. Everyone was asleep except Matt, who opened the door with groggy confusion. "Dude, you look like hell. What happened?" I almost told him. I almost let it spill out. The pale face, the hand on my shirt, the silence pressing too close. But the words stuck. What could I say? That the woods had eyes? That something inhuman tried to get into my car? Instead, I just muttered, "Ran out of gas. Long story." Even now, years later, every late-night drive has me checking the tree line, half expecting to see that pale head leaning out again, because the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was how close it got without making a sound. I was bone-tired when I left work that night, the kind of fatigue that sits heavy in your shoulders and makes your eyelids ache. That wasn't unusual. Closing shifts at Hollister's Pharmacy in Grafton always left me drained. My coworkers teased that I was half vampire, living in the glow of fluorescent lights when the rest of the town was already asleep. They laughed when they said it, but I never found it funny. Truth was, I never adjusted to nights. They always gnawed at me. That Friday in late October had been especially rough. Cold and flu season turned the place into chaos. Shelves went bare faster than I could stock them, customers grew short-tempered, and Martin, my manager, had slipped out the door right at his scheduled time, leaving me alone to sweep up the mess. That was his routine. By the time I shrugged on my worn black coat and fished my keys from my pocket, the red digits above the counter glowed 11:54 p.m. The drive back to Millbrook was 45 minutes on a good night, mostly highway. I always took it easy. Those roads between towns were nothing but endless blacktop, no lamps, no gas stations, just darkness broken by the occasional reflective sign, or worse, a pair of deer eyes catching your headlights like pale coins. A buck had darted across in front of me once, so close I swore I could feel the heat of its body. Since then, 50 miles an hour was my limit, no matter how dead the road looked. I remember glancing at the glowing green numbers on my Jeep's dashboard when I merged onto the highway. 12:17 a.m. That time lodged itself into me, a brand I can't forget. Maybe because of what followed. The road tilted into a soft left curve, skeletal trees standing bare along the shoulder, their crooked limbs scratching against the fog. The mist wasn't thick, but it sat low, hugging the ground, scattering the beams of my headlights so they seemed weak, swallowed whole just a few feet out. I kept the radio off, silence pressed in, broken only by the steady hum of tires and the occasional clink of a pill bottle rolling in the back from my shift. That's when I saw the lights. At first they looked like a work zone, tiny pinpoints, lined neatly in rows, glowing like little fires caught in the dark. I squinted through the windshield. Traffic cones banded in reflective tape, narrowing the highway into a single lane. Beyond them something pulsed, a faint blue glow, blinking rhythmically in the night. "What the hell?" I muttered, my voice startling me in the stillness. My foot eased off the gas. There weren't checkpoints out here. Everyone in town knew Grafton barely had enough cops to cover bar fights, let alone run a roadside operation at midnight. Still, I slowed. The Jeep crept forward until I saw movement in the glow ahead. A figure stepped into the lane, a man in a reflective vest. His arm rose slowly, palm facing me in a deliberate, almost ceremonial wave. I stopped about 10 feet from him, the engine idling low. He began walking toward me. Each step carried a strange weight, too measured, too rehearsed, like he was following choreography no one else could hear. Up close, I caught sight of what looked like a police uniform beneath the reflective vest. The man raised his hand and rapped on my window with a single knuckle, the sound sharp in the quiet. My stomach tightened. Still, I rolled it down halfway. "Yes, officer," I said, trying for polite, though my tone came out edged with caution. He leaned in slightly, just enough that I caught the details of his face. Black, maybe mid-20s, tall and wiry. A faint stubble along his jaw, and a tiny silver stud in his ear that glinted under my dashboard light. His eyes didn't meet mine right away. They lingered somewhere at my steering wheel as if avoiding me. "License and registration, please," he said at last. His voice was low, too low, almost soft, like he didn't want to be overheard. I frowned. Was I speeding? There was a pause, longer than it should have been. He glanced to the side, back at me. "Sir, this is a sobriety checkpoint." The words landed wrong. My chest tightened. I'd dealt with cops before, enough to know they spoke in short, commanding bursts, with clipped authority. This guy sounded casual, hesitant, like he was reciting lines he hadn't rehearsed. "Okay," I said slowly. "But why would you need my registration if you're just checking sobriety?" He blinked once, then straightened his spine. "Step out of the vehicle, sir. We'll begin the test." A warning bell clanged in my head. Every instinct screamed no. But refusing an officer, if he was one, could spiral into something ugly, and out here, there was no one around to witness. My pulse quickened as I unbuckled my seatbelt. Against every fiber of judgment, I stepped out. Cold air slapped my face. Gravel crunched under my boots as I shut the door behind me. Up close, he was taller than I realized, easily 6'2", his frame casting me in shadow under my own headlights. His presence wasn't commanding, it was looming, pressing. From his vest pocket, he pulled a roll of tape. With a slow crouch, he stretched a strip across the asphalt, maybe 15 feet, perfectly straight. "Walk the line," he said, flat and hollow. "Arms out." I hesitated, then obeyed, raising my arms and placing one foot carefully in front of the other. Each step felt heavy, unnatural. Behind me, his footsteps fell into rhythm with mine, too close, closer than necessary. His shadow fused with mine on the pavement, overlapping in the harsh white of my Jeep's headlights. At the end of the taped line, I turned, and that's when I noticed it. The flashing blue light wasn't mounted on a squad car at all. It sat perched on the hood of a beat-up sedan, old and rusting. The paint was dull, one headlight fractured into spiderweb cracks. No markings, no insignia, nothing that said police. A chill climbed my spine. I looked back at him. "Can I see your badge?" He stopped, didn't reach for anything, just stood there watching me. His face emptied out, drained of expression, his features blank in a way that was deeply wrong. Too still, too silent. My pulse spiked, heat surging into my ears. "Badge?" I repeated, louder this time. His lips parted, barely. For a second it looked like words might form, but nothing came. His eyes were black hollows in the strobe of blue light, unreadable. Then, without warning, he spoke, softly, almost tenderly. "1 second, I'll grab it."